For Cryo, is the motion seconded?
I second the motion, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thanks, the member for Greenway. The member for Greenway.
And I support this disallowance motion on the Migration Amendment repeal of certain visa classes Regulation 2014, and I congratulate the member for Corio for bringing it to the attention of the House. And this disallowance motion has strong community support. And even just looking, a cursory look at some of the petitions and some of the activity in our communities, and I'll quote from one of them from change.org. "I've been waiting to finish my studies and get a job so that I can bring my parents to look after them. Just as soon as I was completing my studies, they announced that the visa options are abolished. This is a disaster for me, as my whole life depended on it. I had much faith in Australia and gave up everything I had to follow this dream. This situation has left me helpless." Mr Deputy Speaker, this mean and tricky decision by the Abbott government to axe the non-contributory parent visa and other family visa categories, including the age-dependent relative, remaining relative and carer visa categories, is an absolute disgrace. And it's now incumbent on those opposite to show where they stand on this. And they cannot hide on it now. The minister tried to sneak this through by legislative instrument, but now members opposite have got to show their hand. And it was a sneaky move. And I even quote from Senate estimates where on Tuesday, the 27th of May, a question was asked by Senator Singh of the departmental representative. When will these changes take effect? The answer, "I am not sure. That is a matter being sorted out." Well, that was the 27th. That was Tuesday. These regulations, the repeal of certain visa classes, is dated the 29th of May. So 2 days later, they had been determined. And those members of the government who represent culturally and linguistically diverse electorates, including the member for Reid, the member for Banks and the member for Barton, just to name a few, now have the opportunity to actually stand up for their communities and support this disallowance. Anything less will be a complete and utter betrayal of their communities. These are members opposite, new members who directly appealed to many migrant communities in the lead-up to the 2013 election, and I can't recall them or any other Liberal candidate ever telling their prospective constituents that they would be shutting the door on the non-contributory visa scheme. The non-contributory parent visa allows a sponsor to apply for their parent to come to Australia. The sponsor is required to have lived in Australia lawfully for 2 years and must be able to supply a small bond to be refunded after the parent has lived in Australia for 2 years. This visa category allowed some 2,150 people to be reunited with their immediate family in 2012-13. So at very low cost, it gives hard-working migrants the hope and opportunity for their parents to one day join them in Australia. There can be up to a 13-year wait for this visa to be granted. However, for many, it is the only way for low and middle-income families to have their parents join them in Australia. It opened a pathway for these people, because without this visa category, the only other option for migrants' parents to come to Australia is through the contributory visa category. And the contributory parent visa category can reportedly cost up to around $120,000, and I can guarantee that the vast majority of people who would be applying for the non-contributory category would not have a spare $120,000 lying around. And this government is completely out of touch if they expect these people to pay for this alternative. These sponsors are hard-working people already paying their bills and taxes, and I know for a fact that my constituents, of whom many parents have benefited or could have benefited from this visa category, will no longer be able to apply for their parents' visa because of this absurd cost, and it indeed reflects the unfair nature of this budget. The benefits of the non-contributory parent visa category cannot be discounted by this government. It's already been so beneficial to working and middle-class migrants, including those in my own community. But it is quite clear, Mr Deputy Speaker, that this minister and this government do not understand how important these visa categories are. Indeed, the minister's own performance during question time, as demonstrated by the member for Corio, shows that even he does not appear to understand this very decision. In response to a question from the Shadow Immigration Minister on the 24th of June, the minister said, "We have reduced the number of places for the non-contributing scheme. It hasn't gone to zero at all." This is completely wrong. The minister is either deliberately attempting to hoodwink the public or is not across his own portfolio. You can even see the Minister release an explanatory note which clearly outlines the visa categories that have been savaged. And I quote, "The effect of these amendments is that persons are no longer able to apply for these visa classes from the 2nd of June 2014. That certainly sounds like zero to me. This government is betraying ethnic communities through this move, and it is another betrayal to add to their long list since September last year. And it is my strong concern that these measures by the government could be in breach of certain human rights, including the right to protection of the family. This is guaranteed by Articles 17 and 23 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and Article 10 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Under these articles, the family is recognised as the natural and fundamental group unit of society and as such being entitled to protection." And I ask the Minister this: how is this compatible with our human rights obligations, specifically regarding the right to protection of the family? I and the opposition are appalled at the process, and the community is rightly appalled, that went into producing this move. There was very limited community consultation. In fact, most people did not know at all. Those most affected have met this with shock and anger. This government should have made it a primary concern to understand why this category is so important to communities throughout Australia. One of my constituents, Mandeep Bharti, contacted me regarding this decision, one of many impacted in my community, and they said, "This all started when the coalition government announced on the 13th of May 2014 in its budget that new applications for other family and parent non-contributory visa categories will be ceased. This announcement was followed by the Department of Immigration and Border Protection announcing that the cessation date would be announced shortly. However, suddenly, and to most people's complete and utter disbelief, without any further announcement, the Minister for Immigration made the migration amendment on the 29th of May, which repealed the visa subclasses from the 2nd of June. The last day to make a valid application was the 30th of May, which effectively gave applicants less than 10 hours to lodge a valid application." He went on to say, "I think this constitutes a clear abuse of power. When the decision was made on the 29th of May, why was this not made public by the department on the same day or in advance, which would have given a fair go to everyone who had their applications ready and could send their application on time? Making decisions and hiding it from the public until the day when the regulation was effective clearly shows the government abused their power. I personally feel cheated and don't understand the logic of this cancellation in the first place. Parents who come on the non-contributory categories are people who have families to care for and provide for them. They don't get or even expect to live on benefits. They are harmless people who just want to join their families. This is an utter disgrace from a government that is so out of touch. And for the backbenchers opposite, there is no flying under the radar now. I say to them, Mr Deputy Speaker, your minister cannot save you from voting on this issue. There is no sneaky and underhanded way to get around this anymore. All those opposite will get a chance to vote on this issue today, and they should know they will be held accountable in their local communities on how they vote about this disallowance. Their communities will not forget. And I close, Mr Deputy Speaker, by quoting from Mary Crock and Kate Bones, who wrote very validly under the heading "Coalition's New Visa Laws Make Family Reunion a Preserve of the Rich." And among other things they note, the Immigration Department's policy manual stated that these visas reflected immigration principles relating to reunion of relatives in recognition of kinship ties and the bonds of mutual dependency and support within families. This disallowance is about this principle. Is Parliament going to now vote against this principle, which we have held so dear for so long in Australia? And I'll also point out again the very valid issue which I mentioned, the immense economic and social benefits in family reunion. And again I quote, "Parents and grandparents can provide childcare, allowing sponsors to go from being one-income to two-income households. They're given physical and emotional support. Remittances that would otherwise be sent overseas stay and are spent in Australia. Carers bring huge savings, taking pressure off the welfare and healthcare systems." And I know for a fact, Mr Deputy Speaker, just in my own community, in Blacktown, where the most popular surname is Singh, Older migrants, they shop locally, they buy services, they contribute to childcare, they pick up the kids from school. It is a false economy to suggest that these people are not producing savings and are not contributing to Australian society. This is exactly the kind of Australia we want, one where everyone is contributing, and that is why this disallowance is so important here today.
Thank the member for Greenway. The question is the motion be agreed to. I call the minister.
Thank you, Mr.